Okay, thank you. So can I now refer members to item 4 on your agenda, which is your draft minutes, and can I refer members to the draft minutes of proceedings on pages 579 to 586 of the meeting pack? Can I ask members, are they content that the draft minutes of the meeting on the 22nd of May 2025 are a true reflection of proceedings? Thank you, members. I'll move on now just to item number 5, matters arising. Can I advise members that written answers from the Department of Health on the package of legislative proposals to reform existing EU pharmaceutical legislation are at pages 587 to 591 of the meeting pack, and these proposals were considered at last week's meetings. Are members content to note? Yeah, thank you, members. Just going to move on now to item number 6, and it is proposal for a regulation establishing the Union Customs Code and the European Union Customs Authority departmental oral evidence. And just like to inform members that this item will be recorded by Hansard. Can I refer members now to your relevant papers at pages 5 to 578 of your meeting pack? And just to remind members that as part of its consideration of the proposed EU Act, the committee agreed to request an initial departmental assessment of impact and invited officials to give the oral evidence. Can I advise members that an initial assessment of impact from the Department of Economy can be found at pages 273 to 572 of the meeting pack? Officials in the Department for Economy have also engaged with HMRC, and an initial assessment of impact from HMRC can be found at pages 573 to 574 of your meeting pack. Likewise, members, that just advise that the European Parliament adopted its negotiating position on the proposal back in March 2024. The Council of the EU hasn't yet agreed its position. So currently the proposal is not expected to be adopted and published before 2026. So can I remind members that in line with agreed processes, departmental officials were provided with questions in advance to be answered as part of the oral evidence session, and the questions can be found at pages 11 and 12 of the meeting pack. Officials were asked to share the responses in writing before the start of the meeting. However, I think they just received information yesterday evening from HMRC, so they're hoping to present today, and then they will provide a further written brief on answers to the questions, if that's okay. So can I welcome Keith Brown, who is the Trade Regulation Department for the Economy, and just Keith, whenever you're ready, if you're happy to present. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Apologies we didn't get the written answers up in advance, but like I said, we were only given them last night, and we had a quick conversation with HMRC yesterday evening, so I'll get those up to you this afternoon. I won't go back over the written assessment that we provided you in April, so just straight into the questions. One thing I was going to note was I know there's been concern with some of the standard of evidence from the department in the past, and the committee has written to the Minister. We are undertaking a review into this, and she will update you in June once this is complete. I'm actually heading up that review, so if you don't like it, don't blame me too much. But one element identified, and it's not rocket science, is the closer working links with UK government's important. I was just going to sort of put on the record that, especially in reserved and accepted matters like this, it's exceptionally important for them to sort of support us. And HMRC were excellent in what they've done in the last few days, especially with the bank holiday, to get us some answers and meeting with us yesterday afternoon. And obviously not every question will be able to be answered today, but we're quite happy as well to take away your questions and sort of deal with those afterwards. But if I run through your questions quickly, on the impact of the proposal, HMRC have noted that this is a large legislative procedure and it'll be likely subject to multiple revisions as it goes through all the institutions, as noted. It still hasn't gone through everything so far. Also, with changing global events and various stakeholders, sort of moving things forward, such as the reset with UK government and the EU, the negotiations remain ongoing. And as it's not finalised, HMRC are unable to comment fully on the technical detail of the proposals, including applicability in Northern Ireland. UK government is closely monitoring the progress of the package, and they understand any specific impacts on goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland is key to this committee. The areas of particular focus include e-commerce and business-to-business parcels, and HMRC would welcome your views on potential impacts and benefits as well as this progresses. It is their intention to feed into this process at appropriate junctures and when there's opportunity to do so, especially to ensure that Northern Ireland's interest is appropriately represented, and they will engage with the EU on legislation as it progresses. In terms of the benefits and costs question, HMRC does note that as is ongoing, it's very hard to assess those other than in general terms. And in our written assessment back in April, we did note just the ones highlighted by the EU. It wasn't rocket science. Stuff such as the customs procedure will be strengthened, administrative burdens will be lessened, and so on. Central functions will reduce costs, and there'll be greater coordination across member states. But one item that's possibly of interest to all of us is a more level playing field between e-commerce and traditional trade. That would be useful. In terms of cost, from the EU's perspective, it'll cost £600 million to develop, and €600 million to develop, and approximately €2 billion to maintain over a 15-year period. Plus, then the Customs Authority will be an additional €230 million over a 15-year period. But it is anticipated that should create a reduction in costs across the member states, and that the impact on SMEs should be minimal. If anything, it should be a benefit. There was no specific analysis of the costs and benefits to Northern Ireland, and again, until the final proposals are developed, we wouldn't be able to give you anything further. On the red lane movements, HMRC has published trade statistics for calendar years 22, 23 and 24 is coming shortly. We'll send you the links for those after this meeting. And as set out in the Safeguarding the Union command paper, UK government committed to 80% of all freight movements from Great Britain to Northern Ireland to be not at risk. And the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland has established the independent monitoring panel to scrutinise this guarantee. Although obviously then, once again, HMRC can't give further elaboration on the potential impacts to those red lane movements, that safeguard is in place. In terms of movement of parcels, HMRC has noted that the reform package obviously is ongoing yet again. I'm beginning to sound like a broken record, I do apologise. But the implementation of the customs reforms would not remove facilitations that were brought into effect under the Windsor framework, such as the UK Internal Market Scheme, which is available for business-to-business parcels to move without the need for tariffs and without the need for a full customs declaration. And the second part of your question there, it's the same point again, which at the moment the reform package is currently a proposal, negotiations are ongoing. Unfortunately, it's the same answer when we come to the low-value e-commerce movements. There isn't any greater updated analysis at the moment, but it will follow once they have it. In the trust and check status, it's also the same, in that it's too early to give specifics on this. And the customs reform package, there's a reference in the original brief there just about how it's strengthening the AEO, taking it a step further. But apart from that, there's no further analysis. On stakeholder engagement, HMRC notes the European Commission was consulted on the regulation through its Have Your Say platform in 2022 and 2023. We'll provide a link to that as well, which will include the relevant policy submissions from UK stakeholders. 7 of the 86 responses to the call of evidence were from British-based businesses, with a further 3 made in response to the Commission's proposal when published in 2023. The Government will continue to engage and consult on domestic policy changes in relation to customs in line with usual practice. I personally noted in my discussion with HMRC yesterday that their commitment to engage with main trade groups here would be beneficial, and my team will facilitate this by looking at those inputs through a number of our departmental forums, such as the Dual Market Access Forum and the Export Forum. And if we do get any views back through that route, we will again send them on to yourselves. In terms of departmental engagement, HMRC have noted they will give us information once they can, and ensure they do so in relation to the impacts of goods entering Northern Ireland. The Customs Code, the Union Customs Code, no longer applies in Great Britain for non-duty matters, such as safety and security declarations. Under the Border Target Operating Model, safety and security declarations for EU imports were implemented on the 31st of January 2025. UK government engages regularly with the Commission through multilateral forums such as the World Customs Organisation and annually as part of the Trade Specialised Committee for Customs and Rules of Origin, which is a requirement under the UK-EU Trade Cooperation Agreement. And traders must continue to comply with the UK's border target operating model until further notice. In relation to the single trade window, the government has paused delivery of this in 25-26. The pause is to give government an opportunity to take stock and further engage with traders, ports, software developers and other key stakeholders to better understand their needs for the future of operating at the UK border. Finally, in terms of the need for consultation and taking into account the implications in Northern Ireland, HMRC once again notes that Northern Ireland departments sit as part of the Windsor framework governance structures between the UK and EU, and as such will be involved through those structures on issues of relevance to this regulation. And as I've noted, we will continue to engage with our stakeholders, and if we get any specific views as this develops, we'll make sure that you're informed of those.
Thank you, Keith. I'll just open to the floor now, members. Steve?
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much indeed, Sir Keith. A couple of questions, sort of quite technical, so I understand if you won't know. How has anybody looked at how the Trusted Trader Scheme and the lines of data that are inputted into that, how they marry up with the changes in the EU code, the customs code? And particularly since I think, from the 1st of January we've gone up to, I think they've changed, there's been 49 new lines of code have been introduced on the EU side, the EU customs declarations, but obviously the Trusted Trader Scheme isn't the same. And is there an implication that there will be because we went through a world of hurt of trying to get the Trusted Trader Scheme up and running and getting the IT systems to be compatible, so the EU could read the data so that we build up the trust. Are we now heading for another period of time where it's not compatible? Has anybody asked that question yet?
I'm unsure, but I will get you an answer from that from HMRC.
Yeah. Yes, please. And the other thing about sort of one of the changes coming in this as well as when the customs scheme is, or the EU customs scheme is, the rules of origins definitions are going to change. Well, that will mean there will be different lines that will have to be inputted in Northern Ireland for particular goods.
Again, I will get you an answer on that from HMRC.
Yeah, I know there's also a lot of concerns being raised by the logistics industry about the ICS2, the import control system. Now, I don't know very much about it, but I do understand that their concerns with the European code coming through, it means that they're going to start using the red lane no matter what because of the difficulties in paperwork and obviously the cost for everything from they're taking away I think it's the €150 exemption and taking it all the way down. So everything will probably end up going through the red lane unless that's been sorted out.
Again, I'll ask this HMRC for their analysis of that one. So they're sort of techie questions, yeah. But I think it's really important for people to understand what a fundamental change this is if the two things don't marry up. And finally, and I've asked this question of other people, what is the primacy between EU regulation and primacy between UK regulation? Because we remain within the UK customs territory, but in many respects we're reporting through the EU customs code. So which has primacy? Because that deals directly with the question in the Windsor framework, where the Secretary of State turns around and says, well, 80% of it won't, 80% of goods won't be checked. How does he know? Again, until everything's worked through, because obviously in the proposal itself, it does note that there's a lot of downstream technical amendments and following regulations will be made. So until all those are delivered, it'd be very difficult to answer that anyway. But I will ask HMRC on that. But I suspect it will be we'll watch and see type answer that you'll get on that.
And Keith, because this is a fundamental change, you say the HMRC are more engaged in this. Do you feel as if you've got enough resources to be able to deal with where this is coming from?
At present, yes, because we are in that space where obviously this is an accepted matter, which means we have less and less chance to deal with it anyway. But also HMRC have been very helpful.
You don't hear it very often, isn't it?
Well, you're right. Sometimes there is friction, but in this case, the team's been excellent over there. They've responded to us really quickly. Happy to set up a meeting yesterday, so they were at short notice and so on, and very reassuring. That.
Do you think they'd like to come and talk to us?
It'll be a matter for them. I can certainly ask them.
Yeah,
But it is one of the things I think that will improve the evidence that DFE officials can give to this committee is those sort of relationships. So that is one of our targets over the next sort of 6-12 months, really start to build that up with those sort of teams particularly.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Thanks, Chair.
Any further questions from members?
Chair, yeah,
Yeah.
I had one, although my question will be pretty pointless because I can't find where Appendix A is on the document. Let's see if I can get this back. Keith, thanks very much for your evidence today, and we certainly appreciate your candour in terms of that sharing of information timely. You referenced at the start in terms of us having the information that we need to obviously scrutinise stuff. It's around, and I can't find Appendix A, although I'll read out what I have here and just ask for your view on it. The proposal would also remove an existing exemption from customs duty for goods worth less than 150 euros. The Commission's EM at the start of Annex A, which I can't find, note to self, it'd be really good if some page numbers could go in there for us to quick reference, because obviously we've only got one screen. I should have printed it out, but I didn't. States that this would close an existing customs loophole relating to the undervaluation of goods and will therefore increase EU customs revenue. I'm guessing that kind of means that when people are sending stuff, if something's worth 175, they bring it down under 150 to get an exemption. Would that be right so far?
I presume that is.
Yeah.
That's also my understanding.
Yeah. Was there any consideration, and again, you may not know this, and happy for you to write back to us, was there any consideration, that drop, is that completely gone, that €150 benchmark, and was there any consideration given to dropping that to a sort of like a lower level, because actually just the complete removal of it obviously has quite a few impacts. My colleague,
The EM if you need.
the EM if you need. I mean, was there any consideration to whether that 150 should be reconfigured, or was it simply the EU felt, look, we'll get rid of this completely and this will increase customs revenue for us?
I'm not sure, and I'll try and chase that one up. I haven't read it myself, but on their consideration why that was done. I am aware there were further discussions recently with an imposition of a €2 fee for small parcels coming from China, for example.
Yeah.
So I presume that was related in some way to the fact that moving parcels within the union isn't the issue.
Fee.
Yeah, and I do take your point. I agree with the analysis that the idea of just removing anything below 150 was to stop people gaming the system to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But again, I'll ask HMRC if they have any further analysis.
Look, that'd be great. Annex A might answer my question for me. I'm not sure, but even if you could ask them that question to see whether there's any debate around whether that figure could be altered, or whether their view was let's just get rid of it and it'll increase revenue for them. That's it. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Chair.
Jonathan Munt.
Jonathan?
Thanks, Chair. Just briefly, Keith, see the trust and check traders, the proposed new category for the most reliable traders. Obviously, it's going to require more data, more information, perhaps more bureaucracy. Is there any breakdown of what the potential costs would be to businesses to gain such status?
I haven't got any of that. I'll go and check if the EU impact assessment has got anything in particular, and I'll highlight that to you, or else I'll ask HMRC to have a look at that.
Okay.
The intention is that it's to sort of be more transparent, so the traders can sort of release goods into circulation without circumventing some of these customs controls. So
Yeah.
one would hope that it's more efficient.
Well, sometimes code for being more transparent can be more bureaucracy, more paperwork, and therefore
Indeed.
more cost. So I think we'd need to just bottom that out about its impact on consumers and businesses. The other point would be, has there been any concern regarding, obviously, the creation of a data hub? Now, that's maybe just a fancy word for just the customs details that they already have, but is there any concern regarding data protection across the different jurisdictions?
I haven't seen anything on that. Again, I can take that away and discuss with other colleagues as well in terms of data sharing. I believe that's one of the elements that's not supposed to be coming in for a few years yet. So
Okay.
I'm not sure if there will be an analysis on that, but I'll certainly try and find out for you.
Okay, and just again, it's probably a suck it and see sort of moment, but has there been any change in relation to the content of your submission to the committee based on the UK-EU agreement last week? Is there anything glaringly that will change?
No, the only thing I would note is certainly in light of this sort of bit of work, I've certainly seen that relations between us and UK government are certainly a lot more friendly on EU matters, in my personal experience that is, and I
So
believe that they're having closer discussions as well with their counterparts.
Okay. So relationships have changed in terms of the ability to talk, which is always good. I welcome that. But in terms of substance, there's nothing glaringly obvious of your submission that has changed based on the agreement that was announced last week at this stage.
No, it would remain the same.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Peter, as a further question, if that's okay, Keith?
Absolutely. And again, it's just on what we were talking about, Keith. I've now found Appendix A, which again I should have printed out before I came down. There's a line in it that's for introduction on the 1st of March 2028. It simply says changes to various provisions of the UCC to allow for the withdrawal of the €150 exemption and the introduction of optional simplified customs rates for online sales to consumers. You'll not have this. I'm wondering, is that something we can get our hands on, what those look like? The optional simplified customs rates for online sales to consumers, because that is something that's of interest, because a lot of this goes on, people just, buying stuff. And obviously my fear would be the impact on that and what that will mean in terms of people's pockets. Is there any way that you could see if you could get that for us or where that is? Is that possible?
Certainly, I'll again ask HMRC for that for you.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Just a very quick one. Another techie one sort of thing. One of the things that somebody talked to me about was, and we're now going to have to do the report against the carbon border adjustment mechanism as part of the customs code. So they have to, previously they just didn't bother, just said not known or whatever it happens to be. But everybody's now going to export anything or move it back between sort of GB and Northern Ireland or whatever it is going to have to make a declaration on the carbon border adjustment mechanism. I haven't got a clue what that is. Does anybody know, or can they give us a bit of information?
Yeah, well, actually, my colleague behind me here today, Ali, she's going to be looking at that in future. So no doubt she'll be able to give you more information in future. At the moment, we don't have anything. But what is promising is that under the reset, as mentioned there's going to be alignment of the two emission trading schemes, and then that will mean that two CBAMs will come together.
I think the question is, on some of the, I think it was from, it might be DB Schenker, and there are other logistics companies, but because they're sort of German owned, I think they were saying they were looking at populating what would likely to be a new EU customs declaration, and there was that CBAM mechanism in it, and they were just going, well, what am I going to put in there? Because you're no longer allowed to put no information or insufficient information. You have to have an actual figure, or else the customs declaration is not accepted.
Well, that's it, and it was due to come in at the end of this year.
Yeah,
fully about the CBAM, and it might actually leak into next year. I think now with the reset as well and the change in that, I think we might see a delay. The good thing is, because the UK one wasn't coming into 2027, at least now we should have a greater certainty of where it's going, what the direction of travel is once the EU one announces, and obviously it's only certain sectors as well.
Yeah, no, that's the other thing, because we don't know what sectors is it.
Well, the sectors didn't even align in the two emissions trading schemes or the CBAM. So again, once that starts to come out, that'll give us greater certainty. So certainly it's a weight off our mind, because it certainly did look like being very complex and very difficult to deal with.
If you're working on a sort of a ready reckoner or an idiot's guide, I would appreciate that, please.
Well, yes, we'd appreciate it too. We were hoping towards the end of the year.
Make sure it's shared with the whole committee. If you get that, Keith, that would be great.
Well, certainly our aim was to produce something internally ourselves towards the end of the year once a lot of these negotiations have happened. So once we have that, we'll make sure and share that as well.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. And obviously we'll look forward to obviously the written questions, and there was some questions here posed today as well, and we can actually forward them to yourself as well, sure, if that can assist in your written submission to the committee. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So our members then content to, in the first instance, to ask the British government for an update on its discussions with the European Commission on the potential application of the proposed EU Act under the Windsor Framework, and also regarding its implementation of the border target operating model, the single trade window, and their interoperability within the proposed Act. Yes, okay. And can I just remind members as well that the key stakeholders identified by RAISE are in your pack on pages 575 to page 578.
Give me a
Yeah, I'll give you a few. a minute there to have a look. So from reviewing those lists in your pack, are members content that the views of these stakeholders are sought via citizen space within a 4-week deadline for a response?
Chair, may I make a suggestion?
Yes.
And may I also make an observation? That was probably the best piece of evidence we've had from the Department of Economy so far, even though he couldn't tell us anything, which was actually, but it was refreshing because it seemed to be they were now engaging with it, and I think that whatever we say back to the Department of Economy, that he should be commended for that. It was interesting, he said, improvements with the relationship with HMRC. This will be very, very technical, and we will be absolutely snowed under with different rules and regulations when this comes through. I think maybe we should be inviting HMRC to either give evidence or be one of our consultees on this. Yeah. If we're...
Great.
Yes. I think that's agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, just to check for practicalities in the first instance, so as an agreed action, you're content in the first instance that we would include them on that list of consultees and write out in the same way that we would with the other stakeholders?
Yeah.
And then follow up then if needs be, Steve.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, as members are aware, the Citizen Space Survey will be promoted on social media and anyone will be able to respond. Can I also ask members, are they content that RAISE is asked to monitor the progress of the proposal as it progresses through the EU legislative system?
Yeah.
Yes, members. Thank you, members. Can I ask members now to move on to item number 7, which is your correspondence? And items 7.1 and 7.2 are quarterly status updates from RAISE on the EU proposals which the committee is monitoring. So item 7.1, it's on page 594 to 597 of your meeting pack, and it relates to a proposed regulation regarding the strengthening of the position of farmers in the food supply chain. The proposal is currently awaiting committee decision in the European Parliament. Once the Parliament has finalised its position, informal negotiations with the Council are then expected to begin. And then likewise then, item 7.2 at pages 598 to 602 of the meeting pack, it relates to a proposal regarding field inspections and seed production in Moldova and Ukraine. So at the time of writing, the Parliament was scheduled to adopt its first reading position in relation to the proposal, and that has now taken place. So the Parliament's proposed text now awaits formal approval from the Council of the EU. Are members content to note both of those updates?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Just sort of through the chair, have we informed the Agriculture Committee about that, the first piece, the proposed regulation of European Parliament and Council on strengthening the position of farmers in the food supply chain?
I believe we did when the notification was first received.
Yeah, I know it was first received, but now that it's moved on to the next stage, maybe just send Robbie a note, or sorry, the chair of the Agriculture Committee, just to say this has moved on a bit and maybe they might like to take a bit of interest in it.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah, thank you. So I'm going to move on to item 7.3, and it's on pages 603 to 605 of the meeting pack, and is a copy of correspondence from the chair of the House of Lords NI Scrutiny Committee to the Paymaster General Nick Thomas Simmons regarding the recent summit between the British Government and the EU. Are members content to note?
Sorry, through Chair, sorry to be taking up all the time.
Oh, you're okay.
But just as the interesting thing is that it's quite a long letter saying there's a lot of stuff we don't know yet. And maybe if in your regular correspondence with the House of Lords Scrutiny Committee, maybe yourself and the Deputy Chair might just say, look, as soon as we start sort of populating the data on this agreement, because a lot of it is to do, but there's no actual real detail on what it is. And if we just say that we'd be really like to be included in the loop of that correspondence or communication.
So if members are content, we can certainly write. One other thing to note, and I know Chair you'll be turning to it, we will be engaging with the Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee next week in the visit to Westminster. So if members were content, it would be an ask that we could make during that meeting.
Yeah, you're doing both meetings next week. Apologies, I'm not going to be able to make it under medical advice, but it's with the House of Lords and the House of Commons. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fine.
Okay, so we'll just move on now to item number 8, and it's chairperson's business. And just to remind members that as agreed at the meeting, of the committee on the 13th of March. The committee's joint visit to Westminster and Brussels is due to take place next week. The visit will include meetings with our relevant scrutiny committees in both the British Parliament and the European Parliament. And as always, after the visit has taken place, a secretariat paper recording each of the meetings will be circulated. Okay. Any other business, members? Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Maybe this should have been in matters arising, but it's just relating to the notes on the appendix on page 588. Just there, the written answers from the Department of Health. Would it be okay to just speak to those briefly?
Yes.
Is that okay? Thank you, Chair. I thought the Department's evidence last week was very good, very much like economies this week. There was one question which we asked, and it was, have you identified any potential negative impacts? And DOH then have put in an answer in red there. But I don't think they actually addressed that question. They said what the impact would be in terms of these changes around antimicrobials. But effectively what we're talking about here is if this was applied in Northern Ireland, all antimicrobials that are currently on either the general sale list, the GSL list, or pharmacy only would become prescription only. That would have significant implications, I think, for not only consumers but also for pharmacists and GPs in Northern Ireland, not least the cost of all these new procedures. I was wondering, would the committee agree to write back to Health and maybe see if they'd be slightly more explicit in terms of what the implications for GPs, pharmacies, and the general public would be if antimicrobials were placed on a prescription-only basis. That's a kind of proposal, Chair, I think. Just to get some feedback from DOH.
Yeah, happy to second that.
Members are fine, yes? Yeah. I'll follow that up. Peter?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just then move on to item number 10 on the agenda. So it's the date and time of our next meeting. No notifications have been received, so just to inform members that just in relation to the proposed EU Acts, therefore with the visit to Westminster and Brussels taking place next week, the committee won't meet, so just to inform members that the next meeting of the committee has been scheduled for Thursday the 12th of June. That's okay?
Chair, just if I may, we've been notified of some proposals today, so you'll see that email come round, but just as they're not published acts and we're not subject to those statutory timelines, we'll cover that at the next meeting rather than next week when the visit's on.
Okay. So that's the meeting adjourned, so thank you.
Committee Room 30, sound.